Hello and welcome to Below the Surface. I am your host Darshna and we have a great show lined up for you today. But before we get started, a quick reminder that you can ask any questions or leave a message in the comment section below. As some of you may be aware, it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month this month. So today's show is in honour of this. Over the month of October, we have seen InfoSec experts all provide helpful tips and tricks to ensure we are all more cybersecurity aware. So as a wrap up to the month and to share some more advice, I would like to welcome to the show Dennis Dillman. Dennis is the VP of Product Management for Security Awareness at Barracuda. In this role, he has been responsible for the rollout of an entirely new training program for the Fishline platform, and he has worked with Fortune 100 companies to design and improve their security awareness programs. Welcome to the show, Dennis.
Thanks, Darshna. It's great to be on the show. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for joining us. It's great having you on. So on the theme of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, can you tell us a little bit about what it is and how did it all start?
Yeah, so Cybersecurity Awareness Month started 16 years ago, 17 years ago. I think this is the 17th Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It actually used to be called National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but the need for cybersecurity awareness is global, so they just removed that national moniker. What else can I share? It's a joint effort between the Cybersecurity Alliance, the National Cybersecurity Alliance, and the federal government, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security in particular. So it's a joint effort, private and public sector, and the National Cybersecurity Alliance is a collection of organizations that put together the materials and the training effort. Back in 2004, it was really tame stuff compared to what they do today. Things like, update your virus signatures and change the batteries in your smoke detectors, stuff like that. And now, obviously, they talk about all sorts of different stuff because the security environment that we all work and live in is so much more complex.
It's definitely a hot topic, and it's amazing to see how it has grown, and a really great initiative. Cybersecurity is part of all of our lives. So, how important cybersecurity has become since the launch. It's really amazing to see. So each year, Cybersecurity Awareness Month has a theme. Can you tell us a bit about what this year's theme is?
Yeah, so the overarching theme is, do your part, hashtag be cyber smart. And it's composed of 4 different weekly topics within the month of October. So at the start of the month, it was if you connect it, protect it, emphasizing education around the idea that, any device that is connected to the internet or connected to a device that's connected to the internet is a potential source of risk. And that, you need to be aware of that. You need to be careful about these things that you're putting on the internet and potentially making available to, bad guys. And then there was securing devices at home and work, which is week 2. That was focused, really motivated by the whole pandemic, that crisis that we're all facing. There's always been people who work from home, but now so many more people are working from home. So that week focused on the new risks that people face because they may not have worked at home before, or certainly not worked at home as much. So that was week 2. And then week 3 was actually more industry specific. It was securing internet connected devices in healthcare. And the reason that they focused on healthcare is that the healthcare industry has so many devices. You walk into a hospital, right? There's, the devices that monitor your heart rate, your blood sugar, your weight, all these things that are constantly plugged in, have very sensitive data, and they're connected to Wi-Fi. Barracuda has a product that's a firewall for Internet of Things, as if you've heard that term, Internet of Things. That's the problem that's uniquely challenging for healthcare because of that, quantity of devices and the need to get to that data. They've all become network accessible. And then finally, this week is the future of connected devices. So, what is in the future for all of these devices, all of our portable computing devices like your tablets, your cell phones? What does 5G mean for the devices that you have? What is 5G going to do? Is it going to replace Wi-Fi? Is it going to accelerate data transfer? Is it going to create unique security problems? Kind of all of those forward-looking questions about the future state of connected devices.
I mean, all of them seem like such relevant themes. Connected devices, working from home, which has been such a big thing over the pandemic, and obviously the healthcare. I mean, we've all seen the importance of it at this time. So all of that is definitely something to be aware of when we're thinking of cybersecurity. I mean, you must have seen some changes in cybersecurity and around awareness. How has the concept of security awareness changed throughout the years?
A lot. So if you go back to the beginning of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, even as late as 2004, security wasn't a problem that the employees dealt with, right? Security was a problem that the IT department dealt with. And so all of the security training, to such an extent that there was any, was about how to lock down servers, how to put in firewalls, all of these things that the IT department did. And it usually wasn't something that the employees ever did, right? One of my first jobs was a network administrator, and the employees did whatever they wanted. And they didn't feel like it was their responsibility to be safe. And that has changed dramatically. So, this month's theme is Do Your Part, and it's focused at the individual employees. And I think, almost all employees recognize that they need to have good behavior. They may forget, they may fall victim to a scam, but if you ask them in a calm moment, they would recognize that they need to do more. They need to be more aware of the risks that the organization faces and how they can help. So now it's company-wide training is very prevalent. So fast forward from 2004 to 2011, when Fishline came into existence, we were one of the very first security awareness companies because the market had finally grown to a point where companies were recognizing the need to train their employees, but it was still very small market. And our first customers were all Fortune 100 banks, financial organizations, healthcare organizations. So they were big, they were well funded, and they were high risk. They were being actively targeted by the bad guys. So those were our first customers. But from 2011 to now, we have thousands of customers. We have customers that are as small as 5 employees and customers that have more than 500,000 employees. And that explosion in growth where every company is recognizing the need to train their employees is a huge difference. It just wasn't something that was very common at all when I started, and now is very common. And part of the driver of that is increased awareness generally, but also a lot of auditing firms and enforcing various regulatory standards or other standards that have been imposed, like PCI, payment industry type standards. They all mandate security awareness. So even if you're a tiny company that takes credit card data, you need to do security awareness training.
I mean, it definitely sounds like a positive shift from, where we were in 2004 to where we are today. So it's so great to hear so many clarifications. are now taking cybersecurity so seriously. But what is the reverse? What is the consequence of not reinforcing security awareness amongst users?
Well, the big issue is backsliding. People get exposed to training. Maybe your organization only does training annually, or what have you. And the idea that people forget that people backslide and begin to behave in a more risky fashion isn't a character flaw. All of us have distractions in our life. We have 100 things to do on any given day at our job. We have pressures from the family and organizations that we volunteer at and everything else. And we have to prioritize those. And so if you don't keep pushing security to the top of the queue, so to speak, people are going to make it back of mind. They're going to forget about, oh yeah, I should be doing this. I should be engaging in this behavior. And in your rush to get your job done and everything else, you start taking shortcuts. So that's the risk, is that people will begin to forget about security good practices. And I'll give you an example. So we had a mid-sized organization, 1,000 to 2,000 users. I don't remember exactly how many. They had a great story. They had a 17% click rate, right? So clicking on a suspicious URL is a bad thing. And 17% of people in one exercise clicked on those suspicious links. Over the course of 2 years, they got that number down to, I think, 3%, single digits. They got it way down. And then they had some budget issues, and the individual who was responsible for those exercises left and was not replaced. And the position wasn't replaced for 13 months. So not that long, 1 year, in fact. And the first campaign they run after they got back was 21% click rate. So they had given up all that ground. And 21 versus 17, that's pretty similar. The point isn't that it got that much worse, because click rates can be not very specific metrics. But the point is they went from 3 to 21 in the course of a year. And they were going to have to work on getting people reacquainted with the good behaviors that they needed to engage in order to help protect the organization. And if people are engaging in these risky behaviors, you open yourself up to enormous risks as an organization. Depending on which study you read, the likelihood of a breach is directly related to an email threat of some kind. 70 to 90% likely that the breach was caused by some threat brought into your organization via email. And we sell a great gateway. There's lots of other great email gateways out there, but they can't protect against everything, especially since the email doesn't have to be obviously dangerous to actually provoke bad behavior. So Barracuda has analyzed billions and billions of emails in its existence, and as a result of that analysis, they've been able to create a list of threat types, and we have fairly extensive materials available for the 13 most common email threat types, from relatively harmless at the spam side to very dangerous spear phishing and business email compromise and account takeover. So we have a lot of good material out there. I know Fishline has training available for each one of these 13 threat types. There are specific checklists that you can follow in order to protect your organization against these threat types. Those are available at barracuda.com. But that's what you're exposing your organization to. And each year, it's an exponential growth in the financial damage that these attacks are doing. So it's not just reputational, hard to quantify risks. It's real financial damage in the hundreds of millions now that organizations are facing, and you read about them every day. This city had a ransomware attack. They paid $150,000 to the attacker, and so forth. You hear about it all the time. So it's a real risk, and you want to make sure your employees are participating in the defense against these threats and not simply passive victims of these attacks.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. It really is everyday news. You hear about business email compromise or spear phishing a lot when you're talking about breaches that happen, but also the challenge between productivity versus security is always that age old of people just want to get the job done and don't always naturally think about security first. So talking of that, there's a lot of buzz around the idea of building a security culture within an organization.
Sure.
What does that mean?
So a security culture is a culture that puts security at the top of the list of things that organizations worry about on a day-to-day basis. And it doesn't mean the IT department. It means all of the employees, and specifically the management of the organizations. So from the top down, you have an organization putting security first. So the reason you want this, the reason you want the security culture isn't because, you know, it looks good or whatever. The reason you want a security culture is that it makes your organization far more resilient to the standard risks and threats that an organization faces. So let's start at the top then. Let's talk about the fact that you need executive management and you need your regular line managers all involved in security. If you see them engaged in bad security behavior, you're going to have a hard time convincing your employees that they need to have good security behavior, right? So it's got to be top down. Let me give you an example. Let me anonymize this in my head. So a major Midwest sports franchise that everybody's heard of was purchased by some very wealthy individuals from out of state. And right after the purchase, in the weeks following the purchase, some guy on Yahoo email, was able to find the names of the people in the payroll department at the sports organization and sent them an email that from like, you know, John Smith at yahoo.com. There was nothing convincing about this email whatsoever. So he sends the email and he says, I'm being audited. I'm in the office with the auditors right now. You need to send me the W-2s and the 1099s of everybody via PDF to this email address as soon as possible. And when you're in an organization where the executive management has no problem breaking security best practices, you're more vulnerable to that kind of attack, because now you're thinking, oh, if I don't do what this guy says, maybe I'm going to get fired, maybe I'm going to get in trouble. So all of the PDFs were sent. That's every big-time athlete and every big-time athlete that ever played at that sports complex over the past year. So it was everybody. And they got exactly what they were paid and all this information. And again, this was a lousy fish. You know, they signed it with the new owner's name, but other than that, it was completely unconvincing. All of the telltale signs of risky, suspicious information was present in the email. It didn't have a link, right? There was nothing for an email security program to detect. It was just angry guy yelling to get something. And if you work in an organization where angry guys yelling to get something works, you're vulnerable. So a security culture has to be pervasive. It has to affect everybody, and it's not just bosses. It's the leaders at the organization. Like if you're at a hospital, the doctors and the surgeons, they need to have good security behavior. If you're at a law firm, the lawyers need to have good security behavior, because they're leaders. They may not be your boss, but they're the leaders. And if they're not held accountable, well, why should I be held accountable? That's the kind of what they mean when they say a security culture. So no exceptions. Everybody is engaged in good behavior. Everybody's holding other people accountable for good security behavior. And as a result, you're way more resilient to what might otherwise cause risks to your company. So, for example, if you're migrating from on-premise Exchange to Microsoft 365 in the cloud, at a lot of companies that would be seen as an IT problem, right? Oh, that's just the IT department. Only they need to worry about it, and I'm just going to continue like I always have. But the problem is that it's not just moving physically where the data is located. It's moving the type of storage structure that the data is located in. It's in the cloud. It's not on a physical server somewhere. So the way you get access to the email is different. It's easier to spoof a web page of a email cloud service than it is to spoof the authentication to a data center server, right? One of the most common phishing emails that we have on our platform is, an email that looks a lot like Microsoft 365 login page, right? You don't have that login page when you're using Outlook in a data center that's right next door. So that kind of cultural awareness, and where everybody's asking, what does this mean for me security-wise? What kind of training do we need to send to people, making them aware of these new risks? It makes people ask, how is my data being backed up? There used to be a backup server right next to the email server, but now it's in the cloud. Our backup server can't back it up. How do we back it up, right? Barracuda has cloud-to-cloud backup. That kind of product may not be something that people think of if they're not kind of in that security culture mindset. So those are just some examples of what I'm talking about, but it's creating this pervasiveness to security awareness that makes people kind of assess how they do their job, how they interact with their colleagues, how they interact with vendors. That's what a security culture is all about.
So, I mean, the security culture is there, and you've worked so hard as an organization to build that up. But then you have something like the pandemic we're in today, and everyone goes to remote work. How does that affect security awareness?
Well, the security culture is still going to help, right? Because in these frantic meetings back in March, when organizations were like, "Oh, we need to get people set up to work from home," at least the question will come up, what does this mean for security? So, and what it means, and there's lots of things we could you spend an hour just talking about COVID, but boiling it all down, you've got increased access by family members or roommates that have maybe the ability to see sensitive data, increased use of personal devices and personal networks, and most of all, increased levels of distraction. Several conversations I've had with some more senior types, more well-compensated types, where it's a bit of a light bulb moment for them, where they say, "Oh, you mean not everybody has a dedicated home office that they can go into and shut the door?" But no, a lot of these people, I mean, Barracuda is located in Silicon Valley, right, where housing is ridiculously expensive. People are working at their kitchen tables, and there's pets running around, and there's the family people asking them to do chores in the middle of the day. There's roommates making a mess. There's all sorts of distraction and risk. And if you look at the surveys associated with people's risky behavior, like, we noticed that you clicked on this dangerous link in this last email. Why did you do that? The most common response is, I was distracted, followed by, I was in a hurry. They're kind of the same thing. So if those are the biggest causes of bad behavior, even in somebody who's been properly trained, and making people work from home dramatically increases the rushed feeling and the levels of distraction that your employees are facing, you're going to have a much higher level of overall risk at your organization. And I'm not even getting into the mechanical security components, like, do you have a good enough home firewall, and all these other really technical questions that also need to be answered. But just in the behavior and the awareness of the employee sitting at that kitchen table with everybody bugging them, that's the issue. And it's important for it to be a cultural issue, so that you don't have one person who might be better off than everybody, who has a dedicated office and doesn't understand what the rest of their staff might be going through. This has never come up. It's like, well, 80% of the people go into the office every day. I don't have to worry about whether or not they're doing work at their kitchen table. So that's the kind of thing that COVID creates, without people being immediately aware that COVID is creating this extra risk for the company. So, and if you look at the Cybersecurity Awareness Month topics, you can see each one of them is, except for maybe the healthcare Internet of Things one, they're all related to that idea of, hey, be aware individually that you might need to change your behavior because of your new working conditions.
Yeah, no, I think we can all definitely relate to the distraction of, everyone having to go remote work, and, it's not just you alone working at home, everyone else is there with you, kids, pets, partners, and trying to balance that all. I think that's a reality for a lot of us nowadays.
Right. I was just going to say, I'm very lucky. I just moved to a different house, and luckily, in my new house, I have a dedicated home office. But in my old house, I came to the office every day specifically because I had a hard time dealing with the distractions, right? And if I'd still been at that old house, I would have been wrestling with those while trying to do my job. And that's tough.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's tough just to do your job, let alone think about security as well. But we've had a comment from someone who said, people don't really realize about security until they're hit. And so that's you don't see the importance of it until you've actually had that experience. So we've talked about, what happens if we don't take security awareness seriously. We know remote working should really raise our game a bit more. We need to be a bit more aware of what's going on and understand what employees are going through. So then in practice, what does security awareness look like?
It varies from company to company. And I think the idea that most people have in their mind about what security awareness is a security training video, right? You got to watch a video, some guy talks at you, or there's a cute animation or whatever it is. And that's security awareness. And there's some great training videos out there. Fishline has 3-4 dozen different videos on various topics. We try to keep them interesting and short, but it doesn't really matter how short and engaging the videos are. People resent them. And it's just a fact of life. And part of it is there's a lot of really bad videos out there too. And they can go on for literally hours. My background is big financial organizations. That's where I worked before joining Fishline. And we had a mandatory 45-minute security awareness training video that we had to watch every year. And it was the same video every year. And you couldn't pause it. You couldn't fast forward it. You had to watch it. It was awful. You couldn't even remember what they were talking about 15 minutes, earlier in the video. So adult learners, especially in this day and age where there's YouTube and there's Vines and there's all these other types of videos out there that are really short and really engaging, how do you cut through that noise? So you know, even at their best, people want to avoid videos. And there's another trap that videos can have when they're really clever is you know, kind of the Super Bowl commercial trap. So in the U.S., we have this big sporting event called the Super Bowl, and a lot of people watch it not for the game but for the advertisements.
Yeah.
And there's all this discussion after the game is over about the advertisements, and people are like, "Oh yeah, that one was really funny where the guy fell off the ladder and whatever." And they're like, "Yeah, what product was that for?" And they're like, "Hi,
no idea.
you know, a soda, I think maybe." But and the really clever training videos can have that problem too, where you're like, "Oh yeah, that was actually pretty good. The guy wandering around with a bathrobe," and you're like, "Well, what did he tell you not to do?" And you're like, "Oh, I can't remember." So videos are tough, right? I get it. They're mandatory sometimes, frequently mandatory. But what I am a fan of is what we call in the moment training, and it's not a video. You can supplement it with a video, but here's what it is. You send out a social engineering email or an SMS message, and you know, some people click on it. And the people who click on it are taken to a landing page that tells them, you know, you've been phished or whatever. And it has a picture of the email, and next to the picture, it has, "You should have noticed this suspicious URL name. You should have noticed this suspicious email domain. You should have noticed the fact that this was really bad English and probably not professional communication." Whatever it was specific to that email, they would point out. So it's this little education moment. And believe it or not, the little shot of adrenaline that you experience when you dodged a bullet, like you didn't actually get ransomware on your computer, is helpful for retention in all learners, including adult learners. So little shot of adrenaline, you get a message, it's informative, and from an organizational perspective, the really positive part is that only the people who need the training get the training. Only the people who engaged in the risky behavior get the landing page with the instructions that they have to read. And even the people who get the training, you know, they spend 30 seconds kind of reading it, maybe, and it's very low impact. And it allows you to be much more frequent with the training. Weekly is, you know, I think the ideal, where, you know, at any given time, you might get one of these emails and it makes you more vigilant. It makes you more aware. And that's the whole point of all of this, is to make people more aware of the risks that they face and to be more vigilant about dealing with those risks. And you can make this as fancy or as simple as you like. You know, we pull in real world threats from Barracuda's threat database, and we make those available as templates that people can use in their campaigns. So it's as real as you can get. But you know, I also recommend using some really sloppy looking training and you know, mixing it up so that it's not a big burden. You don't have to make it this elaborate, you know, photoshopping exercise. You can just, you know, grab one of our you know, we have over 1,000 templates. Grab one of our templates and send it out. And you're not trying to create an elaborate risk matrix. You're just trying to get this idea that the organization is under constant attack, you know, stuck in people's heads, and change that risky behavior, eliminate that risky behavior. One last thing about that, or two more things, I promise. The first is that, you know, you can, because these individuals have self-selected into a group, right? They've engaged in risky behavior. Now you know who they are, and they got a little bit of training with that landing page, but you can then follow up with more phishing attempts, or, you know, to see how bad their behavior is, right? Is it really repetitive, or did you just get them in a bad moment? You can also send them training videos, mm-hmm. right? With a more clear conscience about the time they spend watching it, because they self-selected into that group. And you don't have to waste everybody's time when they've already got good behavior. You only need to spend time or have those users spend time that engage in the risky behavior, in which case it's not a waste of time. And then one other thing on that note is I really recommend avoiding any kind of gotcha moment, a wall of shame, any kind of name and shame attempt, anything like that, because adult learners in particular do not respond well to negative reinforcement, right? It breeds resentment. It creates an us versus the security team kind of atmosphere at the organization. If you're doing these in the moment training exercises, keep them pure, unless in the process of doing them you identify people who repeatedly engage in risky behavior. And if you have the need to engage in disciplinary action, you handle it privately, and it's completely separate from the general environment that everybody's working in. You can do positive stuff, but don't do negative stuff with your employees.
Okay. I mean, that makes total sense, and it feels like, I guess, a bit like a journey. You're taking your users on a journey so that they really understand why they need to look out for different types of emails and what are those moments that they can get distracted on. So then on the other side, what are some of the common misconceptions about security awareness?
Okay, so here are the three things that I deal with almost daily. The impression that click rate is the only metric that matters. You can't see my hands. That click rate is the only thing that matters, that the yearly training is sufficient, and that you have to make the simulations really, really good, really, really hard. You're gonna catch a lot of people with your simulations. Click rate is valuable. It is a valuable metric for determining organizational risk. But click rate is not the only metric, and if you make it the only metric, you're gonna create some perverse incentives. And examples of what I've seen are organizations that literally send the same email over and over and over again, so that everybody has seen it, everybody recognizes it, and they never click on it. And they can say, hey, look, we reduced our click rate by 99% or whatever. And it's dangerous because it creates a false sense of security. Having that kind of training where they really can identify one email, or your employees can really identify one email, is like having a virus scanner that can only identify one virus, right? You need people to be flexible. You need people to be looking for general indications of risk so that they're responsive to any risky email. They're not just trained to identify one thing. And the example I'll give here is we had a really big healthcare organization here in the Midwest that had a meeting with us, and they're like, guys, we've done 3 campaigns recently and the click rate's 10%. Are we done? And the idea that someone came up with on my team was, let's switch it up. Let's send them an email that they've never sent before. And it was called, we call it ice fishing. It's internal communication emulation. So these emails can be really effective because they get people angry. They make people want to engage and deal with the problem. And the examples I can give are, your email has exceeded the storage limit of this organization. We're going to stop email connectivity unless you fill out this form and ask for more storage. Or your web browsing has violated the firm's electronic use policy. Fill out a form and justify why you were going to Amazon over lunch, or whatever, right? And it makes people instantly angry. It's completely routine. Everybody gets these emails, so they're not suspicious, right? Their alarm isn't up, and they click. And this company went from 10% to kind of standard generic external attacks to this, which was 40%. And it wasn't just a fluke. It actually resulted in really big changes to that organization's policies and procedures. And that's one of the things you lose when you focus on click rate, is that you're so worried about keeping your click rate down, you don't probe your organization for weaknesses. And that's what you should be doing, like some kind of vulnerability scan. That's kind of how to look at it, is you're conducting a vulnerability scan on your employees, and you're saying, oh, this email is really causing a lot of problems. Let's change our policies and procedures to deal with that kind of email, or increase our training, or whatever it might be. And so tied to that idea of, focusing on click rate, is this idea that yearly training is sufficient, or that you can even be done with security awareness. You can't be done. Yearly isn't enough. We talked about that example earlier. So you've got to really make sure that you're probing your employees with frequent campaigns and a variety of campaigns, so that you're really probing the risks that your organization might be facing. And the last thing is that this idea that you need to make the simulations really hard. Again, there's a lot of value in a bad fish. And the reason there's a lot of value is the people who have the highest level of risky behavior are the people who are going to click on that bad fish, right? Everybody else is going to ignore it, but your risky people are going to click on it. And so you get a much more targeted group of people that you can focus on improving. It's Bob in accounting. Bob clicks on everything. Sheila will click on anything with a kitten in it, or whatever it is. Those problems are your organization's biggest point of risk. Not only does the employee engage in bad behavior, but they're far more likely to have other bad behaviors, right? So the age-old Nigerian prince scam, right? Why does that email still exist today? Give me your bank account information so I can send you money. Why does that work? Because if you're dumb enough to fall for the Nigerian prince scam, you're also going to be dumb enough to give them your bank account information. That they call it a constellation of risk, and constellations of risk tend to cluster on certain individuals. They don't have their virus up to date. They haven't backed up their computer. They click on risky URLs. Bang, ransomware. You've lost all sorts of valuable data. So making a quality fish and using one that's really sophisticated is great, and it definitely has its purpose. But it can also be time consuming, and it might make you less likely to send out email training. So I caution people about that. You don't need to create this convincing situation. You can send out any old fish, and sometimes the worse it is, let me phrase this differently. The worse it looks, the better it is, because it gives you more information about risky behavior in your company. That's it. That's my three. I won't go on.
No. It's all really interesting stuff and useful information. So thinking about those kind of risky behaviors and users, what are some things you find most effective to help users behave more securely?
All right, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm practicing what I preach here when I say educate often, repeat, reinforce the training. Now, that doesn't mean you send people a 15-minute video every week. It doesn't even mean you send them a video every week. But you do something often enough, I would say at least monthly, ideally weekly, where you're constantly poking at the attack surface of your organization. You're mixing it up, different types of emails, all of the 13 threat types. You're using SMS. You're using voice attacks to see where your vulnerabilities are. You're using security awareness as a vulnerability scan. And in order to do that, you got to do it often. Yearly isn't enough. No one would ever scan their servers once a year for threats. So that's number one. You need an engaged management team. And this isn't just, my boss is good about, hiding his password. So that's great. That's kind of like the bare minimum. An engaged management team will also make resources available. And it doesn't need to be hundreds of thousands of dollars or anything like that. But little rewards and incentives go a long way. So if you say every month we're going to have a raffle for a $25 Starbucks gift card or whatever it is, and the only people who get to be in the raffle are people who have reported a fish in the past month, right? So we're going to be sending out, one a week for 4 weeks during the month. If you report them, you get entered into the raffle, and you get entered in every time you report one of these phishing campaign emails. That is what they call positive reinforcement. Naming and shaming is negative reinforcement. Giving people little treats and rewards is positive reinforcement. Maybe it's a pizza party. Once we can all return to the office, we can have a pizza party, and those kinds of things. They're little. They're not significant expenses. And with an engaged management team, you should have the resources that you need to create those incentives and reward people and encourage people. I also encourage you to tap into the natural human desire to compete and have contests. So you're doing the opposite of naming and shaming. You're not naming individuals. I don't ever recommend naming individuals, but you can say it's accounting versus the legal department this week, and whichever department gets to has the lowest click rate gets some sort of recognition, right? They get a traveling trophy. They get, like I said, a pizza party. They get casual Friday, whatever it is, right? You don't even have to spend money to make it successful, but you're tapping into that competitive thing, and secretly you're making clicking and not clicking and reporting emails part of their day-to-day life, right? Because they look at that intranet page, they look at the bulletin board with the results on it, and because they're doing that, they're aware of clicking, they're aware of dangerous emails. And it's totally subconscious because they don't really see that. They just see the competition. Our click rate is at 12%. We need to be more aware. Or they've reported more emails. We need to report more emails. That's exactly what you're trying to do, is increase awareness. So enough said about that. I think if you've ever been at an organization that's done a United Way campaign to get people to donate to the charity United Way, you'll see they have all of these same types of motivators for the organization to use to drive up the level of participation in that. So I highly recommend looking at that as a kind of a role model for security awareness. And then the last thing I would recommend is almost a tip, but don't use security awareness just for basic security awareness, right? This is a phishing email. Here, don't click on this phishing email, and beware of strange landing pages and all these other types of topics that every organization fights. That's great for that. Don't stop using it for that. But you've got the issues that are specific to your organization. So are you moving from one building to another building, right? Use security awareness to inform people about the risks that are unique to that situation, right? There's going to be strangers. There's going to be open doors. You need to be mindful of the clean desk policy at your company so these strangers walking through these open doors don't see sensitive information. Make sure you lock your screen, et cetera, et cetera. Periods of change at an organization are periods of increased risk. And so those events, layoffs, mergers, acquisitions, building moves, or restacks, as they're called in a big office building where you're changing floors, it's exactly like a building move. These are all situations that have their own unique security problems, and you should use the security awareness tool that you have to help educate people about those unique risks and the fact that just the fact that the event is happening represents increased risk for your company. So, and they're also distracting, and remember what I said about distractions from earlier. If you have distractions, people are more likely to do something silly. So all of those things are risks, and use the tools, whatever tool you're using, to help you address the unique situations confronted by your company. And that would include COVID, that would include a natural disaster. All of these things are potential issues you can use security awareness to help you deal with.
Thank you. So, I mean, we could talk about this, I think, for a lot longer, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. So, as a final piece, like, what resources can our viewers leverage to help strengthen their user awareness, and also any last final thoughts and tips?
Yeah, one powerful document that I use when working with a prospect or a customer is the annual Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report. And the reason that that's so valuable is it's kind of a neutral party, right? So whether you're looking at our product or anyone else's product, any data that I give you that has Barracuda stamped on it is going to be suspect by management that might be approving the budget. So instead, a third-party data that supports these important security concepts, like 90% of breaches happen as a result of an email-borne threat or social engineering in an email. That the average dollar value of an incident is X, and so on and so forth, right? All of these are incredibly valuable tools for you, to educate yourself about, but perhaps more importantly, in some cases, to educate your management team about, right? So having a very reputable, large telecommunications company that's not trying to sell you something, provide you with that data, can be very valuable. We have such a cool campus. It's campus.barracuda.com. I can't emphasize enough how wonderful the resources are there. If you go to the Fishline product page underneath the Barracuda campus, we've got a ton of our videos available. We have a monthly newsletter called Click Thinking, and the issues of that are available. The threat spotting sheets for the 13 email threat types, those are available under Fishline. Make sure you look at resources and document tabs on that page. That's where you find them. We have a bunch of videos explaining what the various 13 threat types are. And the other thing that I think in general people should be aware about from Barracuda is our email threat scanner. The ability for you to assess your organization for free and get a sense of what kind of vulnerabilities you might be currently exposed to is extremely valuable, and it's free. So it's something that you can take advantage of, and I strongly recommend that people take advantage of that. But campus.barracuda.com, of course, and it's all a bunch of great stuff. There's blogs out there that talk about, I have one on ice fishing. I mentioned that earlier. I talk about ice fishing in that blog. There's lots of other great topics that are discussed. So those are the two resources off the top of my head that I would recommend is Barracuda Campus, the Verizon Data Breach Incident Analysis.
Thank you. And if you are looking for any of those links, they are in the comments section below as well. So before we let you go, Dennis, any final tips or advice for those watching?
Oh yeah, you asked me that. I'm going to say it again. Educate often. Don't feel like you're trapped with training videos. So educate often. Use those in the moment. And I'm sure the other companies offer something like that. But use a lot of in the moment training tests, and don't be afraid of doing something kind of corny with positive reinforcement. The raffle for a $25 gift card or whatever it may be. Positive reinforcement is effective with adult learners. Try to incorporate positive reinforcements, even if it's something as simple as an email from the CEO, right? That goes to the select group of people who engaged in the right behavior. Even that is, it's totally free and will have a positive effect. Do not, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in my life. Do not underestimate the power of even small positive reinforcement in changing people's behavior. So those are my 2 tips.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dennis. Really appreciated
My
you.
pleasure.
Show. It's been an awesome conversation. Thank you very much. So,
All right.
I hope you all enjoyed today's show and have gained some tips on staying safe. Remember, you can watch all of our LinkedIn live shows from the Barracuda LinkedIn page. Make sure you carry on doing your part and being cyber smart beyond the month of October. Thank you for joining today's show. Until next time, have a safe journey.